The more people talk about things, the clearer, in my experience, they become. And there was a really interesting article today published in the Daily Telegraph by Alison Pearson. And I think, and there have been stuff written by Isabel Oakeshott, and people have got onto their high horse about freedom of speech and so on. But the subject of this case which is so pungent with contradiction, so laced with judicial inconsistency, that it strips the varnish off our institutions and leaves bare the crooked gain beneath, is of course the imprisonment of Lucy Connolly and the ongoing public response or public debate, and not least in the articles by Lord Sumption and Alison Pearson. And I think it's important to start with a simple assertion. Of course, we should have sympathy for Lucy Connolly. We should have sympathy for anyone who is in prison. That's part of the that's part of the religious call to care for prisoners, but not, as Alison Pearson insists, because she's a mother, nor because she has a sick husband, nor because she expressed regrets. These are humanizing factors, yes, and they may rightly temper our response, but they are not the crux of the matter. The central issue is not personal, but institutional. And Lucy Connolly's imprisonment and the failure of her appeal stand as a monument not to the rule of law, but to its distortion, a distortion that favours the famous, the well-connected, and the politically established, who effectively become untouchable. Now, we come back to my initial point. Yes, we should have care for prisoners, and that's one of the motivations for prison reform, which has been overlooked for too long. All prisoners, no matter what they have done, should merit our sympathy. There, but for the grace of God, after all. But what we're seeing what we've seen in the last few months is a bias towards prisoners who have committed appalling crimes and who have been granted leniency, clemency, mercy because of their association with Parliament. Mike Aimsbury, a sitting MP who assaulted a constituent in a manner that was filmed, violent and deliberate, was released after 3 days and has had his sentence suspended, while Lucy Connolly remains in prison for words, however vile, that cause no direct violence. And one must ask, who precisely is this system built to protect? Lord Ahmed, convicted of appalling crimes against children, has had his sentence reduced. And the very same judge refused Connolly's appeal. And we must ask, who is this system built to protect? We must ask whether the lady on the top of the Old Bailey, one of the few representations of justice without a blindfold, is not in fact a more honest sculptural symbol than was ever intended. Perhaps justice in Britain, far from being blind, has been dazzled by the glitter of parliamentary association, by the titles and robes that she can see just a short way from her building. As Orwell might have put it, and indeed did put it with all his acid precision, some ideas are so stupid that only intellectuals believe them. Substitute judges for intellectuals, and you begin to understand the present absurdity. Lord Sumption, a man whose criticism of authoritarianism during COVID gained him a loyal following, has suddenly rediscovered the cold fidelity to judicial authority when it's a working-class woman, not a privileged peer, who faces the injustice or who faces the lack of clemency. Sumption's argument rests as ever on classical legal principles. The indictment, or that Lucy Connolly was imprisoned because of the incitement to violence, the spread of hate, the responsibility of speech. And we don't know how much impact that had. I could say not a great deal, but we will never know. We will never know, because words go beyond the intention of the speaker or the writer. And in isolation, these points about the incitement to violence, the spread of hate, the responsibility of speech, these are serious points, but this is not abstract. It's not about abstract principles. This is about precedent, and this is about parity. And the grotesque element here is the capricious selectivity of mercy. Mercy has been dispensed to disgraced parliamentarians and convicted child abusers, but not to a woman with no prior criminal record, no history of violence, no ongoing threat to society. And we're entitled to ask, I think, what is the purpose of imprisonment? If it's to punish, then Connolly's already suffered as much as Mike Aimsbury. If it's to rehabilitate, then she's already shown remorse. If it's to deter, then the sentence has already echoed across headlines, podcasts, and parliamentary benches. So why is she still incarcerated? If it's to keep society safe, she doesn't present a problem. She doesn't present a threat. Pearson, in her Telegraph column, offers a robust, if at times overwrought, criticism, but she too misfires by locating Connolly's deservingness in her maternal virtues or her political affiliations. That is to repeat the same logic that infects the judicial system, to see persons, not principles. I think we should see persons, but I think there's also a principle here which can easily be overlooked. That principle is precedent, the precedent of releasing Mike Aimsbury, of granting clemency to Lord Ahmed. The correct argument is simpler. When the law becomes a tool for symbolic punishment, when it's applied with severity to some and abject leniency to others, then it ceases to be the law in any moral sense. It becomes a performance, a morality play, a pantomime in robes. And when it favours the rich and the established and the connected, then it falls into disrepute. There is a line of thought that Lucy Connolly is now a political prisoner. I don't use that term lightly, and in fact I would probably be very cautious about promoting that idea. But when a person is in prison not for what they've done but for what they represent, when their incarceration becomes a lesson to others and their release is denied for fear of media embarrassment, then politics, not justice, is surely in command. And here we arrive at the chilling coda. Lucy Connolly's requests for temporary licence were denied not for what she might do, but for what she had said to someone outside the prison. That's not due process. That is not law. That is something much closer to caprice, or what Joseph Heller so memorably called Catch-22. Lord Sumption is wrong, not because he lacks feeling, but because he's forgotten the essential paradox of justice. It's strongest when it bends. It's most revered when it relents. It's most trusted when it doesn't distinguish between the titled and the voiceless, the famous and the forgotten. Alison Pearson is, of course, wrong because she is more concerned with the incidentals of Lucy Connolly's case. And she's not focusing on the two issues which I think are central. Issue number one is that the prisons are overcrowded and we need to make space. And space is being made, but in an arbitrary fashion. And I don't think we should be arbitrary about who remains in prison. It should be a careful consideration. Mistakes have been made. And the second issue is of precedent. The precedent is there for showing clemency. And it doesn't make for attractive reading to be constantly looking at articles that are talking about Lucy Connolly and freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, that debate has gone. That debate has gone, and that ship has sailed. It may be right, it may be wrong, but that's not the basis on which we should be looking at Lucy Connolly's appeal. We should be looking at Mike Aimsbury, and we should be looking at Lord Ahmed, and we should be looking at the favour that's been shown to privilege.